Welcome to Recombine, Sustaining Agency in a Time of Uncertainty. Welcome to Restoring the Contemplative Warm-up. And this is something I advise you to do anytime you wish, especially before any of the modules you undertake or any of the units that you are experimenting with and exploring with us. Okay. Now this one is also about, in some level, waking up the body, waking up its surfaces, its membranes, being aware of the space outside of the body, being aware of the space inside the body, being aware of the reach and the extent to which we are sensing beings in the world. And it'll be very beneficial for you to do this as often as you like, every day if you wish, and very nice to do before we do any of the art and the engagement modules that are to come. Okay? So, to start with, just sense yourself in the chair and just give yourself a bit of a wriggle so you can feel where your sit bones are. At the base of the pelvis, these two sit bones finding their place, finding their resting point in the chair beneath you. And then identify the coccyx behind and let yourself rest in this triangle. I'm doing it the other way, but I can't put my hand that way, so just imagine that's your coccyx, these are your sit bones here. And feel the support of the chair, feel the support of the triangular base. And breathe. Sometimes I think this looks a bit like the basketball hoops that you see in the cul-de-sacs around us. So you have a triangular base, you have a central column rising up out of the base, and then at the top you've got the basketball hoop. So if that works for you, use your imagination to help with that. But from out of the triangular base, you've got the central axis, the beautiful spinal column. And as you breathe, there's this lovely feeling of rising as well as falling. It happens miraculously both ways. Keep your neck soft, keep your eyes soft, your ears soft. And just imagine your head rolling a little on top, almost like a golf ball on a tee. Just feeling it nice and supported by the spine, but also loose and free. And imagine the dome of the cranium, full of space. We've got a brain in there somewhere, but just imagine the space between the brain and the cranial dome. And see if you can refer that cranial dome as a structure in relationship to the central axis and then your tail. So I want you to become really aware of your tail. I'll explain why we're doing this in a moment, but for the moment, just let yourself travel, let yourself experience your body as it is. And then let your tail grow longer. We actually have the memory of having had tails. This is part of our ancestral memory. It's our ancestral architecture. See if you can feel that breathing through your tail. And for some of you, you might actually feel as if your tail wants to reach to the ground behind you. Sit deep in that tail. See what happens. For you, it might be a kangaroo tail, or it might be something like a cockatoo tail. Let your imagination be soft with it. And letting the tail experience the ground behind you or the air behind you. Feel the wind rustling the feathers or tickling the skin and the fur of that tail. And let your eyes go really soft now. Really think back into that tail and let your tail understand the landscape behind you. Let it reach into the ground and into the horizon. Animals are very good at knowing what's happening behind them, even if it's miles away. They pick up the vibration, the presence of things in the landscape. They know the movement in the soil, they know the movement in the air, whether it's a predator or a friend. Just let yourself feel that support and the length of your tail. Great. And when you really, really feel that tail there, breathe into the upper body. Just breathe and feel the difference it makes to have that support. And one of the things that happens under duress, and perhaps the circumstances we've been in the past 2 years, is that we feel very isolated. The body starts to feel like it's alone. It's holding itself up. But we have an opportunity here to really feel what it is to be held. As we develop the modules of restoring and you work through the modules as you wish, we'll be adding to this sense with many other exercises, but this is a very core practice. Sit in your tail, remember your ancient anatomy, and then feel different in your body. We're accompanied by this in our DNA and our history, and we're also accompanied by breath and all the space that the breath massages. So breathing in and breathing out. And see if you can observe the way that the breath moves all the bones. There's this wonderful sense of expansion as you breathe in. And then there's a release when you breathe out. And particularly in this rib area, when you breathe in, the ribs expand and they move into the space beside you. And when you breathe out, the space beside you gets a little bit of its own inch back, its inches back. So there's a massage, there's an exchange, a reciprocation. Both of what's inside you being shared outwardly and what's the outside world being shared inwardly. And all the time, our structure and our membranes are being moved and massaged. Let yourself enjoy this space. Just gently take one hand and slide it across, and then the other, and slide it down your arm. Slide it across the front, slide it across your forehead. So you're aware of your body as a surface, but the breath itself is filling the whole of the interior within. This is continuous. As long as we're alive, we're breathing. There are some ancient shamanic traditions around the world where there's a belief that everything is standing up alive. Everything has breath, has language, has intention, if you like, and is in a process of reciprocation and exchange. What does that feel like to experience this? What does it feel like to experience the back of your body breathing and massaging the air behind you? Being in reciprocal dialogue. What does it feel to have that tail listening and hearing and also receiving nourishment from way back behind you? Everything standing up alive. That's a phrase from River Junction Curlew, a North American indigenous elder. Just sitting in that exchange. We are equal to it. We have our place in the world. And rest. We're going to explore the space between the sides of the body and the arms and the body itself and the space around us. Now, we have given a term to this in some of the other modules, that Japanese word ma, which we've shown you before, which actually is about defining space as something of substance. And as per the rock gardens that are so beautiful in the Tokyo temples, you see that the space between rocks and all that raked gravel, it's the proportions between objects that is as significant or even more significant than the objects themselves. Now, in terms of medical theories in places like in the Chinese tradition, spaciousness is something that is given exercise every practice of Tai Chi is actually about movements in space, and space is actually a malleable thing. Space has history and substance and volume to it. This movement here, which we practice in Tai Chi, is actually about flicking another body. It's almost like the space has the memory of the body or the enemy about to attack you in it, and you are anticipating that and working with that, and you're working with all these movement trajectories, you're working with history of bodies in space, you're working with the energy and the forward motion of other bodies and other energies around you. When you practice Qigong and Tai Chi as well, you get acclimatized to this sense of actually sitting in a kind of sphere of support. It's a remarkable feeling, and if you ever get the chance to experience that, I relish it, and I wish you get the chance to experience that as well. So we'll be exploring a little bit of that experience today. And firstly, I just want to start off by working with something that's really simple. Now, if we were to draw the human body, you'd be drawing a torso, legs, and arms. And then, of course, between our arms and our body, we have an armpit and we've got space there. So let's work with that and actually amplify or heighten that sense of what that space might mean. And let's entertain the idea that space is significant to start with, and that it's possibly as significant as what our bodies are themselves, just to let our minds be teased with that notion as we go into the exercise. Okay. So we start off, we've already done our warm-up, and now we're going to just enliven the surface and the membrane in order to experience the space between more clearly. So taking the palm of one hand and just stroking down your arm from the shoulder down, as if this were a paintbrush that is just able to articulate that edge, that surface, and actually think of the edge of the hands as well and of each finger. So take time to articulate the edge of each finger, which is also then articulating the space between fingers, like so, okay? And now stroke the underarm, and then stroke from the armpit down the side of your body. You can be quite firm with that. And then let your shoulders be loose, resting your hands, the back of your hands on your thighs, and then see if you can feel that buoyancy that's there between your arm and the side of your body. And as you're breathing, you'll actually get a sense of the way that we know that the rib cages expand as we breathe in, and they release when we breathe out. Just see if you can call your attention to that active space and how we actually have a kind of compression of this space here when we breathe in, and then an expansion when we breathe out. So this space here, this beautiful triangle, if you like, is being exercised, it's being massaged by our breath. Just spend a moment with that. Try and relax your shoulder as well, because it will happen regardless of whether you're tense about it or trying really hard. Just let it happen of its own accord. And if you like, you can even imagine that the ribs are like a piano accordion that just open out with the breath, and that gives you a visualization of that expansion process. Okay? But we're also working synesthetically. We're working with this sense of the body seeing and feeling at the same time. So the experience is happening across all dimensions. Okay. And then have a sense of the outer line of your body here, and then imagine the relationship between your arm and the space to the side of it, as if your arm could breathe and also breathe all its way over to the side of the room, which is also quite a lovely feeling. You can feel that the interior of the body is responding to that. It's like that shoulder's actually wanting to get involved with this negotiation. It's actively engaged with space and spaciousness just by calling our attention to it. And in fact, every trained actor knows that when you prepare for an action, you take the breath that you need in order to... It's the thought about that movement in space that gives the impetus and the momentum for that ball to be thrown. And the same with the voice and with every gesture and every form of expression we have. Just think of that now. If you think of a word that you wish to say to me or into your video screen, yellow. You have to think of it first, and you take that breath and yellow. I give you yellow. Or I give you sharp red. Or I give you flowers. Okay? We're just exercising that sense of what it is in our reciprocation with the world. And just for one moment as well, we're going to just close our eyes and think about the cranial dome. I sometimes think of it architecturally like a dome on pendentives, like those Byzantine churches, and it gives a lovely sense of height and spaciousness in the cranium to your head. We have a roof to our being, and it's so full of space. There is space between the brain and the cranium, and it's lovely to get to experience that. Just think of all that spaciousness there. And indeed, scientifically, there is as much space in an atom between the nucleus and the electrons circulating around it as there is between a spot in the middle of a football field and the edges of the football field. So we are dealing with something of substance. We're actually going to show you a few images now, which I think you'll be able to see, especially from this first one that we're bringing up, just how active and dynamic space, how much we can recognise how active and dynamic space is. Now, this is a mime artist, and you can see that if you were to draw a pencil around the outline of his body, and you think of all that dynamic of space, like his body is so articulate, but space around him is so articulate as well. It's being activated and acted upon. And of course, a mime artist, like any artist, with his material is his body, and he's activating the world around him. And so we see that space differently because of that activation, through that activation, and the articulation through his medium. And when we look at the next image we've got coming up, it's a tree, but it's also a demonstration of the energy and the movement from the interior of the tree reaching up through its trunk and up to its extremities. In fact, trees are quite remarkable. They have a part of the tree called the apical meristem, which is right at the top of the tree, the topmost trunk, and it communicates through the interior system of the tree all the way down to the deepest roots to tell the tree itself, how tall it is. And that communication actually sets off this trigger of, I'm going to absorb this much minerals and nutrients, everything that I need in order to match my height. It's quite a remarkable internal system of communication that trees have with themselves, let alone the communication they have with each other in a forest. But if we look at this picture there, we can almost see you do, when it comes to springtime and the leaves are about to bud, you can feel this extraordinary energy of things about to burst forth. And this is often what we use as artists. We have this sense of something about to burst forth, and we work with that, and we bring it into being. And this tree here, it's possibly still at a dormant phase in winter, but we can imagine what it's like in spring for each element of that tree to be about to burst forth. And then what's it bursting forth into? Each leaf will be bursting forth into the space between those branches. And the branches are calling forth the leaves. There's actually something I discovered about an embryo, whether that's a human embryo or an animal embryo, is that it's not just the DNA programmed interior to the embryo itself and its own cell structure, but it's actually the conditions surrounding the embryo that call forth its growth. So it's the chemical components that signal that the environment is ready to welcome the cells into growth, into the embryo, and for it to grow forward, which is a remarkable, remarkable discovery made in about the 1930s by Erich Bleckschmidt. So this image of the tree we're looking at the material world, and we're looking at also the space between. And then in our last image we're going to show you is by André Kertész, the Hungarian photographer, and you can see how dynamic space is. It's a representation of movement, even though it's a still frame. You have bodies that are moving through space, moving into where there's space between people. And you can see the trajectory of all of that potential movement, the thing that's about to happen. And so I love working with that idea of what's about to happen, what's about to come forth. And these still photographs have captured an incredible sense of the dynamics of space and between bodies. So now we're actually going to move into a drawing exercise in which I'm going to ask you to draw the space in or around the object. And we now have up on the screen the first image. And it's probably a good idea to draw a frame to match roughly the dimensions of the image that you've got there. And then just take a moment to think about the space and try to draw the space. Just as we were thinking into the space between the arm and the side of the body, we're going to be thinking into the space between this sculptural object and what's around it and what's between the material substance of it. Okay, so just taking a moment to do that. It only needs to be a quick sketch. We'll give you a few, like half a minute to do it. So think about capturing the space in between. And then you might like to colour in that space in between. And don't worry about accuracy. What I'm more concerned is that you actually breathe into that spaciousness and examine how intense the space itself is, how active it is. And so I'm just going to show you my very quick sketch. And so you might have something like this up on your page in front of you, okay? All right. Then we're going to go to another photograph now. Similarly, it's probably the simplest thing to do to draw a frame around it on your page, I beg your pardon. And then find the spaces, draw them. And again, we'll give you about half a minute for this. Try not to clench your jaw while you're drawing. Try and breathe. And perhaps even remember to sit in your coccyx and let your coccyx support you as you're drawing. And again, you might like to colour in the space between. And I'm using a soft crayon because it keeps my arms loose and you can work quite quickly. Okay, and I'm going to show you my very quick sketch of the space between. Now, if I were a printmaker, I might even make this. I might, if I was working with the kind of thing that leave a print imprint, I might put another piece of paper on that and unfold it, and all I'd be left with was the negative space. So it would all be the ghost of the only thing left is the ghost of the object, the original object. And I should have said before that when we talk about negative space, it's a term that's used in photography and used in visual art a lot. And there's nothing negative about it. In fact, it's a very positive force. And form, as we explained, comes forward into space. It's just that we have the positive and the negative in a photograph, as you can see from the image here, and you have the substance and the space between the substance, which, as we've already discussed, is full of energy and, in fact, vital force. If you were in a landscape out in the nature, you'd see that, you know, just how full that space is anyway. It's full of air, oxygen, minerals, all of that sort of thing. So it's a positive space, but we just haven't actually come up with another term to replace it yet. Right, and then we're going to do something a little bit different with our final drawing, but we're going to show you our last one. And here you can see that there's a lovely rectangular, it's a little bit more elongated, so draw yourself a longer rectangle. And once again, just half a minute to, let's just draw the outline and not colour it in this time. And keep breathing. Keep remembering to sit in your tail. So you're capturing something of it. It doesn't have to be accurate. Now, take another colour. So at the moment, all I've got is this outline. Now let's go back to the picture, and I'd like you to actually contemplate what's going on in that space. Like, how is that talking to that body? How is the body talking to it? And maybe you can start to fill in the space with that energy or those patterns or those lines. You might need to imagine with your own body, like if you were leaning into the space in that way, in that shape, like how would you fill that space? What would you fill it with? Keep looking back from your drawing to the photograph. See how you are filling that. And you might even go off the frame that you've drawn. You might need to change colour. Try and make explicit how active that space is. So before you feel like you've finished, I'm just going to show you once more what my drawing is like. And relish in your own body that sense of what's being expressed and how active it is in that engagement. Just another half minute to finish off. So we've just been exploring through gesture how active space can be, how active it is, and how actively we can express it and work with it and represent it. What I'm going to do now is to go into an exercise of deep listening, and once again remembering that space is active. Whenever we have movement and space, there is sound, because every movement has a sound, whether we, with our human ears, hear it or not. The soil has ants moving in it, they make a sound. Wind is something that other creatures pick up on the varying degrees of subtlety in at much sharper level than we do with our human ears. Dogs can hear sounds that are higher than what we can hear. So just entertaining that idea about how much the volume of sound is out around us and in us. And we're just going to, if you wish to close your eyes, feeling really secure in your chair, sitting in your sit bones and your coccyx, feeling the spinal column rising out, contacting the breath, the lovely sense of massage of the breath as it expands the ribs and then we release. The sense of buoyancy between our bodies and our arms, that spaciousness there, and the spaciousness to the sides of our bodies and the front and the back. And we're going to breathe in as if we could breathe in right from deep in the substrate of the soil up through a central channel into the volume of our bodies, and then breathe out side to side at the top of the head and down back into the ground, and breathing in and up through the central channel of our body and forward and back. And then breathing in through the central channel of our body and then out in all directions like a fountain. And doing that a couple of times more, so you get that sense of an incredible sphere of breath that we're sitting in. Okay, and let yourself enjoy that sense of roundedness and fullness and buoyancy. Okay. Good. So now we've got soft eyes already, and let your ears go soft as well. And one of the things you might become aware of is maybe you have a sense, because we've been moving a little bit and calling attention to our breath and movement, you might even feel, you might hear the flow of blood in your neck or behind your ears. And imagine you can hear the flow of blood through your arms. Now, at the same time as this is happening, of course, the lymphatic system is doing its own thing. The breath is doing its own thing. There are a lot of systems in the body that are moving forth, working within their circuitry, whether we're conscious of them or not, and they've each got their own rhythm. We're not a rigid system. The heartbeat itself is irregular. Something they discovered when they gave people artificial hearts is that the more regular you tried to make the artificial heart, the worse someone felt. They actually had to allow for irregularity. The heart adjusts and shifts and changes. So we have regular rhythms, and within that we have irregular rhythms as well. And even if all you pay attention to in just this moment is the breath in and out, and out. And then you know that your part is doing another pulse. It's doing its own thing. It's adjusting and listening and reciprocating, but it's a little bit like this, okay? This is happening all the time in our bodies, okay? Okay. And sitting in ease with that notion and that reality, that realization. Letting them carry forth. So now, just pay attention to the heart. As we said, anything that has motion has sound. And there's always a part of our body that can hear whatever that is, even if our ears can't make it into an audible sound for us. But listen to the heartbeat. Your body knows the beat of your heart. And babies hear the mother's heartbeat when they're fetuses in the womb. So we're going to explore that you listen to your own heartbeat, and you also listen to your fetal heart. This lovely, light, quick sound. They're each doing their own thing. And if you can, and if it feels good to do so, listening to the heartbeat of the earth that continues slow and steady and deep, all at the same time. You might even feel it or hear it through your feet. Be aware that the breath is doing its own thing, like a fourth rhythm against this, or alongside it. Great. And then whilst we're listening to these, we call them contrapuntal rhythms, when things coexist and work just alongside each other, but they're not lined up. You might let your ears scan for other sounds in the room. We don't need to match anything, we just need to let them be and listen. And then sounds outside the room. A bird call. Footsteps. Wind. Just what is there. And breathing in and letting your body fill with the breath. Just hold the breath for one moment. And then breathing out. And then breathing in. And breathing out. And breathing in. And breathing out. And as you take that last breath out, that last conscious breath out, just be aware of how much substance there is in the room around you and all the space around you. If you're a synesthete, you might actually see colours around you, or it might just be that you have an awareness of all of these things that coexist. Well done. And if you feel so called to do so, maybe you might like to annotate something from those experiences. There's a number of ways you could do that. It could be that for you, you might like to write a little song to the heart, or a little poem to it, or you might like to draw an oval, and within that oval, you might draw something that represents what you heard from one of your organs. For me, that's my heartbeat. And beside that, I might represent when I heard a bird flitting around outside. And I might also draw something that represents the blood flow. Okay. Just a little mapping exercise so that you've got a sense of that complexity, however that might work for you. And there might be words there as well, so please, if you're called upon to do that, maybe write some words down. And we'll just give you a few moments for this. So welcome back. If you've paused your camera, we welcome you back into the room. I'm just going to share some of the things I wrote because in reflecting on them, the reflection happens after the documentation. Reflecting on them has taught me something about how I sit in the world in this moment. My heart was a window to the grasses. My blood forgot itself to the chainsaw. Frantic? Was I frantic this morning? Okay. So I have noted 3 phrases. The first one, my heart was a window to the grasses, shows me some kind of parallel dialogue, a duologue that was happening between me and something inside my body and something quite external to my body. But there was a dialogue there. And I just find that it's a delicious feeling, but it also makes me feel curious. This could be the beginning of a short story. I do feel an energy in it that there's more there to continue with, so I might make a note for myself and say, I'll come back to that. There may be a short story in that or another drawing. My blood forgot itself to the chainsaw. Now there's elements in there of almost like being hit by sounds and, I have something that's got continuity in it, my blood, but then something that interrupts that. But then that's an interesting dynamic there as well. It's something that just has a forward motion to it, so I might come back to that in a different way as well. And it's also a kind of what we might think of as animate and inanimate. Different qualities of sound, different qualities of substance to the elements working with each other or beside each other in the same moment of time. And lastly, my phrase, frantic, was I frantic this morning, puts me in a position of, in a particular relationship to time that I think is, quite unique to this moment and this realisation. Was I frantic this morning? Oh, how curious, I'm not frantic now. So I have a before and an after in this sequence, in just a few words. So one of the things that processes of deep listening can do is to place us in different relations to our location, our sense of place or placement, into how our bodies are engaged in the world, and also our relationship to time. So I might leave this unit with you. We have more to do in this module, but I just want to, we might have a pause there, and at any time, as with any of these modules, you can continue into the future with any of these ideas and give exercise to those ideas and notions and see where it takes you. So now we're going to play our bodies and play the room. And by that I mean the following. So in the previous exercise, we were making visible what we could hear. And in this exercise we're going to do together, we're going to try and make audible what we made visible, if that makes sense. So we're actually kind of amplifying something that we've observed by another means now. So with your own drawing, you might look at it and just pick up an object, whether it's a stick or if you've got a little mallet, or if you've got a paintbrush would do. I'll demonstrate with the paintbrush first so you don't have to think it's too technical. Now, if I were to try and make the sound of this, which I think was originally that was my heartbeat, this was something else, so this is the blood. And I'll pick up this just so that it's a bit clearer and more audible. And then if I wish to represent this other sound, which was something I heard outside the room, it could be. Okay. So I'd actually like you to take a moment with your own drawing and to see if you can represent the sound. See if you can find the gesture with an object that can help you amplify it and represent it as a sound. So just choose 2 or 3, and I'll leave that over to you, and then we'll come back when you're ready. So we often think of these exercises as you're making clear a little unit that you can remember. So it's a mnemonic tool. You've got that thing that you can come back to. I had that swishing sound and I had that more clipped sound. And now we're going to be using those sounds, combining them with an aspect of listening through our presence to the sounds of the room, and we're going to be playing the symphony of the room itself. So I'd like you to go into soft focus, and I'd like you to listen. So you have the memory of what was in your own drawing. You've amplified that. You have units 1, 2 and 3. And now unit 4, if I was to listen very carefully to what's in the room around me, might be something like this. And I have some helpers in the room with me, so we're actually going to be amplifying whatever we can hear in the room, and whilst we're going to come in one at a time, and then I'd like you to come in with your own sound that you are letting yourself tap it out or swish it out. And the important thing is to keep listening so that we're allowing all these sounds to be present to each other. We're playing the room. Let's give it a try. And breathe. And come in any time with your own. it might change. And then remember something from your drawing. Listen to your heartbeat. Soft ears, soft eyes. Half a minute more. And finding a way to finish, but we're going to finish by re-entering our breath. So breathing in and then breathing out, straight down the central axis of your body into the ground, and then breathing in from deep under the ground, in through the top of the head as if you're breathing in a reverse fountain. And breathing out, share from your interior to the external world. And breathing in the gift of the world to you. And then breathe out down the central column. And just stay for a moment with soft ears, listening to the room. It's been such a pleasure having you with us on this journey through the Restoring Project. This is now a library that you can have access to, come in and come out as you need, do different units one at a time or in sequence, or go back and forth through them as you need. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to share any thoughts or responses or share any of your artwork or your thinking. But please stay in touch, take care and enjoy. Lovely to have you with us.